We've all seen Apple's big product launches. They're amazing, right? A total masterclass in marketing. But once a year, they have to release a legally required document that tells a very different story. So today, we're going to decode their annual 10K report and see what's really going on behind the curtain at Cupertino.
And that's really the question, isn't it? The key word here is have to. This isn't about what Apple wants to tell us in a slick keynote. Nope. This is about what U.S. law forces them to disclose to investors, to regulators, and to you. And honestly, that's where you find the most fascinating stuff. So first up, what even is this document? Well, let's break it down. Think of the 10K as a company's official, legally binding playbook, and they only have to open it up for us once a year.
Okay, so the official definition is that it's a company's annual report card filed with the SEC. But a better way to think about it is like a super detailed annual health checkup for a public company. It covers absolutely everything, the good, the bad, and yeah, sometimes the ugly. It's a deep dive into their business, their money, and maybe most importantly, what they're truly afraid of.
And that's really the magic of the 10K. This is the official story, but it's completely stripped of all that slick marketing. You see, the language in here isn't crafted by advertisers. It's meticulously vetted by lawyers. Every single word is chosen to be accurate and, legally defensible, which gives us this rare, totally unfiltered look inside the company.
All right, let's get to the numbers. How does this giant money-making machine actually work? How do all those billions roll in? Because the scale of it is, and I'm not exaggerating, just staggering. Get ready for this. $416.1 billion. That's their total net sales for the year. I mean, to put that number into perspective, that is more than the entire gross domestic product of countries like Ireland or New Zealand. It's just an almost unimaginable amount of money. So where did all that cash come from? Well, no surprise here, the iPhone is still the undisputed king, making up a full 50% of every dollar they make. But look at this. Look at that second slice of the pie. Services. That's the App Store, Apple Music, iCloud, all of it. At 26%, it is now a massive business all by itself, bigger than the Mac and the iPad combined. Let's just pause on the iPhone for a second. The iPhone business alone brought in nearly $210 billion. If the iPhone were its own company, it would be one of the largest corporations in the entire world. It's the financial engine that fuels everything else they do. And these sales are happening everywhere. This is a truly global machine. While the Americas are still the biggest single market, Europe and Greater China are absolutely massive, contributing over $175 billion together. Okay, so the money is clearly flowing in. But a 10K isn't just about the good news. It also forces Apple to tell us what could stop the money train. And that brings us to the risk factors section. This is basically a list of what keeps the executives in those fancy new offices up at night. And some of these are pretty surprising. We all think of Apple as this totally dominant force, right? But listen to this. In their own legal filing, they admit they have a minority market share in all their key hardware markets. It's a pretty stark reminder that the competition out there is absolutely ferocious.
And here's another one. Despite being one of the most powerful companies on Earth, they are completely dependent on an incredibly complex global supply chain. They flat out acknowledge that they're at the mercy of component shortages and wild price swings, things that can throw entire industries into chaos.
And it turns out even Apple isn't immune to the wider economy. When inflation is high and interest rates go up, well, people like you and me have less money to spend on premium phones and laptops. Apple is basically admitting that a global recession is a direct and serious threat to their bottom line. This slide really just says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you have the marketing promise we all know. Seamless, effortless, perfect. But on the right, you have the legal reality from the 10K, that their products are incredibly complex and can have defects. It's the perfect summary of what this document is all about. So, beyond all the market forces and supply chain worries, Apple is also facing immense pressure from a completely different direction, the legal and regulatory world. They're fighting major battles on multiple continents, all at the same time. And it's been relentless. Just look at this timeline from the past year or so. The U.S. Department of Justice hits them with a massive antitrust lawsuit. At the same time, the European Union opens its own huge investigation, which then leads to a fine, and all the while, they're still in court battling companies like Epic Games. It's a global gauntlet. And this pressure has real teeth. We're talking about a €500 million fine from the EU Commission. That's not a slap on the wrist.
It shows that regulators are dead serious and willing to impose huge financial penalties. When you put it all together, these legal headwinds are targeting the very core of Apple's business model. Everything from the App Store to that super lucrative deal they have with Google for search. Each one of these represents a really significant threat to how they make money. So what we have here is this fascinating picture of a company making incredible amounts of money, while at the same time facing incredible pressure from all sides. So what's their plan? How does the 10K suggest they're going to navigate all this? Well, a really big clue is this number right here, over $34 billion. That's how much they invested in research and development in a single year. This is Apple's primary strategy. They're going to try and innovate their way out of trouble by creating the next generation of must-have products that keep all of us locked into their ecosystem. So with all these risks swirling around, what does Wall Street think? Well, if you look at their stock performance over the last 5 years, it's pretty clear that despite all these headwinds, investors have stayed incredibly confident in Apple's ability to navigate any storm.
And you can see why. The company is so unbelievably powerful financially that after funding all of its operations and after funding that massive R&D budget, it still had over $104 billion left over just to give back to its shareholders. That is a sign of mind-blowing financial health.
And that leaves us with this one ultimate question. Apple is at the absolute peak of its financial power, but it's also facing totally unprecedented legal and competitive pressure. So, which one of these two massive forces is going to define its future? The answer, I think, is probably being written right now in the plans for next year's 10K.